In 2013, there had been a series of murders spanning the country. These were particularly frightening because it seemed that the killer or killers weren't sticking to any particular standards as are usually seen by FBI investigators. There seemed to be no type of victim other than female. The range was broad. There had been a couple of teenagers, one a high school cheerleader, walking home from an evening football game. She had only had 2 blocks to walk, but she never made it. Her broken and battered body was found in a dumpster 2 miles from her parents' home. One other teen girl, black hair, dingy black clothing, her eyes darkened with eyeliner and shadow, a pin and ink tattoo on her ankle, her ex-boyfriend's initials. She'd been last seen leaving a party, pretty drunk, her friends had said. She'd gotten into her car, but was found only a couple of hours later, in the middle of an intersection, her throat slit, her head dangling off to one side. There had been a grandmother of 3 leaving a beauty parlor after having her color touched up. On her way to a family dinner, she'd stopped at the grocery store. The police found her car still in the parking lot. Cameras showed a man with a hood carrying her bag of groceries out of the store. There had been no cameras in the parking lot. There had been a bartender, a bus driver, a school teacher, a nurse, a cancer patient, a dance teacher, and a dog walker. These women came from all walks of life, and in total, there had been 24 so far as anyone knew. The only thing connecting them to each other was a detail that the police had not yet released, and that was that the killer, or killers, had cut a large chunk of hair off of each victim's head. Bailey Garrison was just 14 years old when her older sister was killed by what turned out to be one of the world's most prolific serial killers. Her sister was Kayla Garrison, and she'd been the head cheerleader for Adams High School in Rolling Meadows, Iowa. To Bailey, her sister was perfect in every way. She was pretty and smart, popular, kind, and funny. Everyone loved her, and she was Bailey's best friend. Bailey could tell her sister anything, and her sister would never talk down to her or treat her like her concerns were stupid or silly. Bailey and Kayla would stay up late on warm summer evenings, sitting on the deck outside Kayla's room, braiding each other's hair or painting nails. Sometimes they'd just take sleeping bags out there. They would look at the stars in the sky and talk about their dreams for the future. They had their weddings planned out, how many children they wanted and what their names would be. Kayla was so much more to Bailey than just a sister. Then came the night that was etched into Bailey's brain forever. The night that changed their lives. The entire family would never be the same again. Their friendships were never the same again. Her mother suddenly seemed older over just a 24-hour period. Her father withdrew, and Bailey couldn't find any joy in the whole world, and she didn't even want to after that night. The night her sister stayed to help clean up after a football game. The lights had been left on over the field while Kayla and a few other people swept the stands, picking up the trash left behind by the crowd. Kayla's best friend Rosie said that they were laughing and goofing off while they performed their chores. A couple of the football players had also stayed to help. Adam Coltrane had stayed, and Bailey knew that Kayla had a huge crush on him. She'd even carved Kayla Coltrane into the same wooden deck they sat on so many times. It wasn't a surprise to anyone when Adam stayed after with Kayla, and Kayla had told Bailey and her parents that they could go ahead and head home and not wait for her. Bailey knew that Kayla wanted to flirt with Adam, and that she didn't need her daddy standing around. They only lived 2 blocks over, and the way would still be lit by the field lights if Kayla had got out of there in time. She hadn't. The lights were on a timer and they went off around 11:30 p.m. Adam had offered to drive Kayla home, but she told him that she lived close and she'd just walk. She didn't want her dad asking a bunch of questions like she knew he would. He'd prod her with, "So, do you think he's hot?" in that dad voice, trying to tease answers from her. She'd pass on the embarrassment and just walk. She'd done it 1,000 times. They'd lived in that house on Cortlandt since Kayla was a baby, and she was almost 16 years old now. As Bailey Garrison sat on the rail of the overpass, she was thinking about all of those things. The fact that Adam had been the prime suspect, having been the last to see her and all. But then the FBI came to their house and told the family about the connection to many other women being killed. Killed, Bailey thought, as cars sped underneath her feet, some honking. The way her sister's body had been found, how she'd been killed. It had been a year ago now, and Bailey couldn't take it any more. Seeing the light go out of her parents' eyes, missing the one person she loved the most in the whole world. How could she go on? How could she ever experience joy again without being able to share any of that with Kayla? Her eyes were swollen and red as she stood up, her legs shaky from sitting so long, her vision blurry as she let herself fall off the overpass. She had only fallen a few feet when she hit hard. Her brain was trying to process what had happened. She was alive. She hadn't felt like she'd fallen the entire way down. Her leg was crumpled underneath her. The pain was excruciating. She heard cars honking, and she felt her body rolling this way and that. She felt air blowing over her so quickly and cold. Her body was freezing. Her head dazed, she began to black out. Carl Morgan was driving down the 281 and underneath an overpass with a semi-truck when cars began honking and flashing their lights. An SUV swerved in front of him. A man's arm was sticking out of the driver's side window with the man's palm facing towards Carl's rig. The driver was pumping his brakes. More cars were next to Carl, the drivers and passengers yelling something that he could not make out. The car in front of him motioned for him to pull over, and Carl pulled his rig in behind the car on the shoulder of the freeway. People began running up to Carl's door. He opened it, and there was such commotion, yelling, waving, pointing. "There's a girl, the girl." It was all coming at him so fast. Carl's heart was beating out of his chest. A woman pulled on his leg. "There's a girl on your truck," a man yelled. "On the trailer," said a woman. "She jumped off the bridge." Carl quickly got out and ran to the back of his trailer. He climbed up the ladder, closely followed by a man yelling, "I'm a doctor," and there she was. A small bit of a girl, maybe 15 years old, her leg bent and twisted, her hair matted, blood flowing from the back of her head, her eyes closed. Bailey's mother, Eileen, began to speak. "Thank you for coming." She had a handkerchief in one hand and she was crying. "I don't know how to say this without crying, so please excuse me. My daughter Bailey will be fine. She has some injuries, but none are life-threatening. I just want to say thank you to the observant drivers who saw Bailey jump, and to Dr. Evans, who was placed by God at that scene, and to Bailey's true angel, Carl Morgan. Our little girl is still with us. I could not bear the loss of 2 children." She began shaking and crying into her hands. Bailey's father pulled her in close and began to speak. "We truly believe that God placed Carl at just the right place at the right time. Carl, being a kind and gentle soul, will take no credit for saving our daughter's life. Come up here, please, Carl." And up walked a graying man of about 45 years old. He had a bit of a pot belly. His face was clean-shaven. He was wearing slacks and a white polo shirt, tucked in, and a big silver belt buckle with a semi-truck imprinted on it. Carl walked up to the microphone. Honestly, I didn't do a thing. I was just driving. Dr. Evans here, he helped check on the girl. It could have been anyone's truck." "No," said Eileen. "No, Carl. God chose you. Someone else might have just kept going. You are our angel." And she hugged him tightly. "He'll forever be family she said to the crowd of reporters. "And the same goes to everyone who helped. And to Dr. Evans." Then the camera started clicking and the questions started coming, quickly and loudly. The family walked away as Dr. Evans walked up to the microphone. Carl Morgan still had a delivery to make. He crawled up into his rig. He opened up the glove box to grab his cigarettes, and "Damn," he said, pulling his hand back. He'd poked his middle finger on the shears he'd had wrapped in a dishcloth. He put his finger in his mouth and he sucked on it. He reached back in and got the pack of smokes, and he also grabbed the scissors. He wrapped them back up in the cloth, and a few strands of hair fell out onto the floorboard of the truck. Carl picked them up, reached back into his cabin, grabbed a fishing tackle box, pulled out a Ziploc bag that had number 26 written on a piece of tape. He unzipped the bag, and he added the blonde strands to the blonde strands already in the bag, and placed it back into the tackle box.